So Bronwen Dickey enters a room. What would your theme music be? Oh, man. Brendan asks a girl a question, and she laughs at him. It's like high school all over again. Anyway, what we're looking at here is just another episode of #CNF, episode 21, with Bronwen Dickey. I wish that wasn't the only time she laughed at me. You'll just have to listen and find out. So she wrote a kick-ass book, Pitbull, The Battle Over an American Icon, published by Knopf. As is always the case, the podcast is a conversation that was very wide-ranging. Everything from the Tao of Henry Rollins, binaural beats, and the embarrassment over a certain book that will remain, for now, unnamed. So, without wasting too much time, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and subscribe to my monthly email newsletter at my website, brendanomera.com. I send out a little list of 5 things or so that I find interesting over the course of a month. Any emails with questions, queries, or you just want to say hi, it's Brendan at brendanomera.com. That's it. Enjoy this conversation with Bronwen Dickey. Cool. Well, thanks for indulging in what I'm working on. But why don't we talk about your wonderful work?
Oh God.
Oh man. You've got this wonderful book named Pitbull: The Battle Over an American Icon, published by Knopf, that comes out this month. And it's
next week. 1 week.
Unbelievable. Can you believe it? I mean, I feel like I've been watching since we've connected on Facebook and everything else. Like I feel like this has been it's just been brewing and brewing and brewing, and now it's finally here. So like, how does that feel? That it's just now it's game time.
Absolutely terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. I think whatever that piece of most writers is that's so excited about pub day or the attention or reviews or any of that stuff that makes some people so excited and thrilled, for me, it's just absolute terror. I am really, really frightened. I mean, it's being under a microscope that I've never been under before. And especially as like a journalist or, nonfiction writer, I'm so used to, I love meeting people and I love hearing about their stories and I love having the focus be on them. And it's often very uncomfortable and strange for me to have people asking me questions and, for the focus to be on me in any way. So it's very, very anxiety producing. And then, it's almost like you've given birth to this thing and then it goes out in the world and who knows what's going to happen out there. Mm-hmm. It could get shredded.
It could be. And it's no longer yours at this point. Like you've done your work, and now it's up to other people to dissect it, embrace it, reject it, this, that, and the other, and
absolutely
that loss of control. Like how have you mentally prepared for the arrival of the book to the masses?
Oh gosh, a lot of nail biting, a lot of pacing, a lot of beer. There's really no way to prepare yourself at all, I don't think. It's just, you just kind of close your eyes and jump. I think that's really all I can do. But there's always this fear of, when I'm lying in bed at night and my, eyes are open, like I practically have like toothpicks holding them open. All I'm thinking about is there one thing I could have done differently? Was there something I gotten wrong? What all these doubts you have, and there's just nothing you can do about it anymore. So I guess all I can do is just cross my fingers and hope that I'll get through it, I think.
You brought up an interesting point about now that you're used to doing all the interviewing, asking the questions, and now you're kind of thrust into that spotlight. I feel the same way. Not that I've been interviewed extensively, but like I get pretty petrified if anyone's asking me questions, and I get really nervous when I talk to other writers or just interview people in general.
I don't know if that's just something with me and my own anxiety issues, but I wonder what it's like for you. Like, how do you approach your interviews and your research in that sense? Like, what do you deal with to sort of get that game face on and like get into reporter mode?
That's in the beginning, I think when I was in school, when I was just learning how to do it, the kind of performance anxiety stuff was very immobilizing for me. And I would have to psych myself up for like days sometimes just to do an interview, because I really thought, interviews, I thought the important part of an interview was for me to prove that I was a professional and that I deserved to be asking these questions. And I didn't want my sources to think that I was, ignorant of of their work, or I wanted them to like have this nice impression of me. And when over the years you realize, it's just not about you at all. As self-conscious as you are, that just has nothing to do with any of it. And if you approach people with a genuine interest in who they are as a human being, just like kind of like you were saying earlier when we were kind of chatting back and forth in email, just like you were going to go get a beer with somebody, I'm interested in everybody's story. Everybody has a story. Everyone has something to say. And so rarely do we ever get a chance to sit down with someone and tell someone else our story, that when I come to people and ask them in a genuine, open, sincere way for them to tell me about their lives, they're usually tremendously grateful. And I always come away learning something from it. So the best thing I ever did for myself that way was just to, get over myself and get out of the way.
Yeah, it comes down to like you said, there was this fear of being ignorant of their work, but that ends up being like a strength in your corner. Like, your power is, I am ignorant about what you do. I respect what you do. Now tell me what you do.
Exactly. And help me get excited. Because as a writer, what you have to do is you have to translate that to an audience who has absolutely no knowledge of it. So especially when I'm doing something, if I'm interviewing someone who maybe does something very involved and technical, some type of scientist or whatever, I always say, please explain this to me the way you would to, say, a smart, curious 8th grader. Like that, so that kind of strips all the jargon out of it. That strips all the over technicalities out of it. Just make this as simple as possible so that I don't miss anything. And then once I have that understanding of what you do, then we can build to like the higher technical stuff. But first of all, strip it all down for me and explain it in this kind of smart 8th grader standard, because that is usually how I will have to strip it down for the audience and explain it piece by piece. Not that everyone who's reading what I'm writing are smart 8th graders, but let's say a smart 14-year-old is, they're curious, they're interested, and they have a very, am I allowed to swear on here?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh,
They have
yeah.
a very low tolerance for bullshit, and they get bored very fast, right? So if you're just leading them on this ridiculous tangent that has nothing to do with your story, they'll say, this is boring, and I'm stopping reading. So I always kind of think about that in the back of my head. I try to obviously write for a very, very broad audience, but I think if I had to explain this to a smart 14-year-old or a smart 13-year-old, would I be able to do it? And that's kind of the gold standard. And that's where ignorance really helps you. Just my mentor, Patty O'Toole, in graduate school used to say that the journalist motto should be ignorant and proud of it, which is kind of true. I mean, there's willful ignorance where you're not caring about what someone says. And then there's, I don't know about this, help me learn.
Right. And I wonder, like, how did you get your start in this type of storytelling? What was the draw for you, and what made you want to take this leap and get into this line of work?
I always wrote on my own throughout high school and college. The first kind of real essay that meant anything to me was one that I wrote right after my dad died when I was 15. And there was so much kind of emotional chaos around that experience that the first thing I wanted to do was kind of make it linear for myself by putting it into this, by putting it into a story form that helped me make sense of what was happening to me. And I hoped that it would be something that other people could relate to as well. So I wrote a 1,000-word essay. I actually had when my father died, and I took 2 weeks off school to go to the funeral and deal with stuff at home. And then I went back and I had an English paper due, and it was an essay on anything that we wanted to write. So I wrote about that experience, and I ended up sending that to Newsweek magazine, and it was a My Turn column in 1997. It was really shocking because when I wrote it, I didn't think about it going. I mean, I was 15 years old. I didn't think it would. I just wrote it for myself. But the letters that I got from people that said, your experience really spoke to me, and you really touched on some things that I've been going through, and this helped me, really showed me what the power of nonfiction storytelling can do. So I wrote throughout high school and throughout college, and I didn't think I would be a writer for sure. I thought because my father was a writer, my brother's a journalist. I really wanted to go my own way and do my own thing. But there was just nothing else that I enjoyed as much as I enjoyed writing. So after college, I did a whole bunch of kind of crappy menial jobs. I explored the dimensions of marginality for a while. And then I kind of rolled the dice and applied to an MFA program and figured, well, if I get in, maybe it's a sign that I should actually pursue this. And if I don't, maybe I need to get a second job waiting tables or something. And I got in. So that was that.
So what impact did your father, who's James Dickey, who's a famous poet and writer, what impact did he have on your life?
Oh, tremendous. I think about him every day. I think the amount of time he spent with me, amount of time he spent engaging my ideas. He was a ferociously curious person. And I think a lot of my kind of natural curiosity was nurtured through a lot of the things we did together, whether it was reading encyclopedia articles about something that might have been in the news, or watching a nature documentary, or looking at maps of places like Papua New Guinea. I mean, there were all these kinds of things going on. He lived an incredibly active intellectual life. He was always trying to learn about something. He was either writing his own stuff, and when he wasn't doing that, he was learning about other things. So that kind of life of the mind and the environment that he created around that was really, really important for me as a kid, especially because I was, a very awkward child, and I really didn't have many friends. I was bullied in school pretty badly. So I was alone a lot of the time. And yet I grew up in this wonderful house full of books. There were floor to ceiling bookshelves on every wall of every room in our house. It was absolutely amazing when I look back on it now, and just having access to all that information. I think something I always think about is the great Henry Rollins once said, no, seriously, I love this quote. He said, music is made by the people music saves. And I think stories are written by the people stories save in the same way. And stories absolutely saved me, for sure, from a lot of loneliness, a lot of boredom. And he was absolutely instrumental in that.
Well, the way you describe him, being curious and very mindful and just introspective and seeking out the deeper meaning, and just being, like you said, deeply curious. Isn't that just the very core of being a journalist and a true storytelling person?
It is. It is, for sure. And that's kind of the thing that I love most about the work that I do, is that, especially with nonfiction, I mean, fiction writers feel this, I know too, and they do it in a different way, but to be able to have a question pop into my mind, like, I wonder what X is like, and then to be able to go out and explore the world of X for as long as I want, and then tell other people about it, is just, it's the greatest job in the world. There's nothing like it. Nothing can top it.
So you said you were awkward in school and bullied. In what ways were you awkward, and like how did what was it like growing up? Feeling like you had that sort of bullseye on your back, and not certainly not a positive one.
Yeah. Well, as wonderful as my dad was in so many ways, and my mother too, they were both really fascinating, smart, caring people, but they, as I say a little bit in the book, they had some very significant problems of their own. My father's alcoholism is, what killed him when I was 15. He was bedridden for 3 years before he died. And my mother had a very significant substance abuse problem as well. So there was a lot of turmoil, a lot of emotional stuff around that. And because my father was who he was, it was very public. Those problems were very public. And so sometimes things would be in the newspaper, or, it was just, it was a really hard fishbowl to grow up in. And other kids were incredibly cruel about it. So, I had a couple of friends here and there, but I learned, I guess I learned to kind of look at the world from an outsider's perspective a lot. And I think when I read and listen to interviews with a lot of other journalists, it's interesting how many other writers have felt that way, that you didn't quite fit in, and therefore you learn to observe the world around you really carefully, what motivates people, what their relationships are like, what they're going through, all these things that you might not necessarily be part of yourself, that you have to kind of observe from outside.
And it sort of drives you inward too, and there's almost nothing more sort of intimate than being with books and with stories, because you get to be of and with another writer's mind. And
exactly.
And I imagine for someone like you who got such negative attention, that when you were taking part in these stories, it was like an option. Well, it was an avenue of like non-judgmental entertainment where you could just be one with something and not feel attacked.
Oh, exactly. And you could just have these wonderful escapist adventures. You can go down the Mississippi with Huck and Tom. You can you can climb Mount Everest with, Edmund Hillary. You can do all these amazing things and be teleported into the minds of these incredible people and into their lives. And especially knowing how many of the struggles that I or anyone else go through, how universal they are. I mean, those stories, like a great story, I was talking to a friend about this today, and he reminded me of something that I said years back that I didn't even remember I said. But he was saying, remember when we were talking about the power of story, and you said that a great story collapses the distance between two people to zero. And I said, no, I don't remember when I said that, but wow, that's actually pretty good.
Tack it up on the board.
Yeah, that's true, because that is exactly how I feel. You don't feel alone anymore. You can have these wonderful adventures in your mind all over the world with as many friends as you want.
Now, you said because your father was a writer and your brother was a writer, that you were trying to sort of carve your own path, away from those paths. At what point, let's say, what did you have in mind, and then at what point did you just ultimately relent to the momentum behind you that this was what you were going to do?
I probably thought I might, get a PhD in English or something like that, or maybe go to law school. I mean, for someone who's like heavily into the humanities and has like absolutely no aptitude for, math or particle physics or anything like that, the options are fairly limited. But at a certain point, I just realized I didn't want to deal with the politics of academia at all. I love teaching. I absolutely love teaching. The opportunities that I've had to do it, I've loved every second of it. But I can't abide the politics of academia at all, and being on committees and that kind of thing. I just wasn't interested in that. And with law, it was something that I was intellectually interested in, but I couldn't see myself getting tremendously passionate and fired up about. So unless I was, maybe something like constitutional law or civil rights law or something like that. But I saw so many people that I know kind of go into the meat grinder of law school and come out as doing something they didn't really want to be doing because they had to pay off all those loans, and I didn't really want that. So I crossed my fingers and said, if God help me, if there's any way I can actually make a living as a nonfiction writer, I'm going to try it. So, and here I am. So.
What were some of your early repertorial and nonfiction gigs like?
Oh, goodness. Bumbling, like weird adventures in ineptitude, I think. I mean, I had no idea. I had never worked on a school paper. I never reported for the school paper in high school or college or anything like that. So after the 2 years of my MFA, everything I learned to do, I really just had to learn. I learned by doing, doing and failing and doing and failing and doing and failing. I remember the first reported story I ever tried to do was about heavy metal tribute bands.
Nice.
And I followed this one band on the road for a while, and this story got so complicated. Like, I overwrote this thing to such an insane degree. It was awful. I mean, I had lists of questions. Like, I typed up lists of interview questions for like each member of the band that ran like 5 pages single spaced. I mean, there was just like, it was stuff like, how did you experience, like, what was your existential experience of the 80s? I mean, it was like this weird, like, I was trying so hard and I wasn't getting to the meat of anything. I was just like spinning wheels. So, but I learned a tremendous amount about what does not work from the heavy metal tribute band opus that was not. So that was that. And then during grad school, I was just desperate to get any work that I could. So I took assignments from any magazines that would have me. My first kind of assignment that a magazine sent me on was a artist profile for Garden and Gun, actually. And I didn't know anything about art, and I didn't know anything about writing profiles. And I definitely bumbled my way through that one, and I, learned all kinds of lessons. And then I was like taking one of my teachers had a student who worked at a travel magazine, and that travel magazine was willing to give me a shot. And then I did an assignment for them, and then I did like captions for them. And it was just like one thing after another. I did book reviews for the San Francisco Chronicle for, I think, like $200 a piece. And yeah, a lot of book reviews, a lot of here and there, a lot of catch as catch can. So
what was your query process like to get these early assignments?
Most came through knowing someone who knew someone who knew someone who was willing to give a new writer a shot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's still kind of an important part of how the whole business works. It's like, it's a lot like dating in that way, in that it's really hard to go up to someone in like a crowd if you're a complete stranger and ask them to like go on a date with you, because they might be like a serial killer. Your severed head might end up in a bag. And it's much easier to say, I have a friend of a friend of a friend who maybe you're not totally into, but like, will you go to a movie with this person?
I love that's where your mind went then.
Well, one never knows. I watch a lot of Dateline. Talk about a perfect arc in storytelling. But yeah, so, a lot of the business is really navigating personal relationships that way. So it was those early travel things were because my teacher had a former student who was working at a magazine who was willing to take a shot on who had been a young writer once and remember what that was like and was willing to take a shot. But a lot of times I think, I'm not sure I've ever pitched anything without some kind of intro to somebody. Well, and the ones I have always bombed, so I'm not really the person to ask. Whenever I've cold pitched anything, it has not turned out. I am not good at it. It is not my forte. I am not a salesman.
So you eventually, years go by and you get to the point where you're writing this book, Pitbull, Battle Over an American Icon, and I wonder how conscious you were of putting battle in the subtitle with a dog that is so now just unfortunately so associated with fighting. Yeah.
Very conscious. The original title of the book was actually Dog Fight. It was like dog / fight. Because what I learned most from the process of reporting and writing the book is that we are the ones doing the fighting. This is about us hashing out our issues with each other, and we're using dogs as proxies to do that. So the battle that is going on is a human battle between groups, and it's a battle over culture. It's a battle over values. But yeah, I was very conscious of that because I wanted to, and my editor and I went back and forth about titles a lot. But we did want to convey that this is something controversial. There's tumult kind of there, that it's not like a static a static history, that it's a dynamic story. So yeah, for sure. But certainly, and I'm sure people will pick up, or they'll see battle and they'll think about, fighting or whatever. But I hope once they get into it, they'll see that it's really about us fighting and not the dogs.
Yeah, that's something that I found so like striking and engaging about it, is that like caught in the middle of just our human strife was just this poor animal who was, like, as you say in the subtitle also, that it was an American icon. I was just in Hawaii. I was at Pearl Harbor and went into the bookstore, and there was like I forget the name of the book, but it was like, sort of like hero dogs in history, and right on the cover, a little medallion right in the dead center is what we typically refer to as a pit bull. And I was just like, oh shoot, how great is this? I'll be talking to Bronwen about it, and that is just evidence of what she wrote so beautifully about in this book. At what point did you come to this realization that that the pit bull was at one point like the darling dog of America, and then it just took a whole total like 180-degree turn in just a few decades?
Yeah, pretty early on. Pretty early, I started noticing that when I would kind of ask people, because I'm so, again, curious about what people kind of like what the man on the street thinks or what the woman on the street thinks, that I would early in the research process. I would do my interviews and I would do my reading and stuff, but I would also just be asking people around me. Like if I was, having a burger at a restaurant on a reporting trip or whatever, I would ask the wait staff, what do you think about pit bulls? And so I did a lot of that kind of just really informal information gathering from anyone and everyone I could. And what I noticed most when I asked people that question is how fast they pivoted from the actual animal to the person they perceived to be behind the animal. So it wasn't really, they weren't parsing the specifics of canine genetics. They were saying, well, with the dog, I don't know, it might be okay, whatever. But it's those people, those tough, macho, asshole, whatever. There are all kinds of like horrible words used, but it was always directed at the person. The person seemed to be the big point of anxiety. And that happens so often that I was just kind of struck by, we weren't really talking about dogs anymore. And so when I was digging into the history, I then started noticing how much that had been true for hundreds of years. Dogs are such a part of our lives and they live in such close proximity to us and we have such tight relationships with them that we end up projecting lots of positive things onto them about courage and loyalty and bravery and, all these wonderful virtues. But we forget that we easily project negative things onto them as well. And so if a lot of, as I kind of talk about in the book, a lot of the marketing, for lack of a better word, around breeds is about branding. What kind of person are you? Are you a Maltese person? Are you a cockapoo person? Mm-hmm. Are you a Rottweiler person? And we all have an idea in our heads what that means. But a lot of that is marketing and history and culture and all kinds of stuff. And it really doesn't have a whole lot to do with science. So there are dogs like for people you might think are like you, and there are dogs you might think are for people not like you. And if you have a real problem with a certain social group, if your social group is in conflict with another, there's no reason to think that somehow their dogs would be exempt from that.
Yeah, when I was reading the book on the air, I was finishing the book up on an airplane, and my father-in-law turned to me. He's like, "You're not getting one of those dogs, are you?" And I was like, "Well, no. I have two other dogs." And I was like, "No, Melanie, my wife, and we don't plan on getting a pit bull, but I wouldn't mind having one. They're wonderful dogs." Yeah. And but it came down to, I was like, well, this book really isn't sort of strictly about the pit bull. It's about how it became, it's between the strife between people and it being a scapegoat, and also it getting such a bad rap because it's sort of like the outlaw dog du jour. Yeah. And it's just like, yeah, I guess that's why I don't like it. It's kind of got like this outlaw thing, and that just goes right to, he was picturing the people who typically own, exactly what he pictures them to be, and so it was like, wow, that's just like right to the core of the book. So and it all has to do with the position, where you're standing too, as to whether that's a good thing. Like for as I talk about a lot, in the 90s when the dogs became like late 80s, early 90s, when they became kind of a hip hop icon. If you were a kid growing up in the South Side of Chicago, then that the dog is the hip hop icon, you'd see a pit bull and think, that dog defends people I know. Like that's a dog I feel safe with. That's the dog that I have all these positive feelings about. Whereas, like, for instance, as we know, with all the police brutality and stuff that's happened in Chicago, seeing a police dog might fill you with absolute terror. What is this? So whereas if you go out into the suburbs, the white woman going to the grocery store might see a police dog and that makes her feel safe. Whereas, the pit bull is associated with this world she doesn't spend any time with. And that's terrifying. But it all has to do with where you're standing. And the dogs,
they're on the same behavioral spectrum as dogs of any other type.
And I'll read here the opening epigraph that you chose for the book by Bertrand Russell. It says, quote, "Neither a man nor a crowd nor a nation can be trusted to act humanely or to think sanely under the influence of great fear." And I wonder, when you read that, what struck you about it, and why did you choose to put it right up front as the epigraph of your book?
Because right away, I was reading one of Russell's collections of essays on, I think it was on critical thinking or skepticism or something, and I was thinking a lot about the influence of fear on the mind and on decision making. And I wanted people right away to be kind of alerted to that as the large theme of the book. Like, what are we willing to do when we are afraid? How much reason are we willing to put aside? How many people will we allow to suffer? What kind of things that are not in accordance with the values we think we have? What will we do if we are frightened enough? And that's really, and what are we truly frightened of, more or less? And so I wanted that to kind of prime the reader's mind for what was coming.
So what was it like dealing with Diane Jessup, who she struck me? She's a very interesting character in this book, a very interesting woman, very passionate woman. And you two kind of you two, like, you stand up to her and stand up to her in this. And I think you guys you have a mutual respect for each other. At least that's the way it came across.
Sure.
But I wonder, what was it like in dealing with her and her approach to the breed?
Yeah, I had only I knew her only through her reputation, the books that she had written, and also she has a very active presence online, and she's very kind of no holds barred, and she writes very angry posts that she calls her asbestos glove letters. And so I only knew her through that, and I thought I don't know, I assumed that we would have nothing in common. And yet because she is such a figurehead for kind of the historical pure American pit bull terrier, I figured I really wanted to talk to her and learn, why she was so passionate and why she felt this way. And it was a huge and very important lesson for me when I went out there, because her online persona is this one way. But again, it's like that thing where you sit down with somebody and you learn their story, and that distance just collapses. And so we were able to have these really long, thought-provoking, in-depth conversations. And I could see where she was coming from, even when I didn't agree with her. And so I was upfront and honest about what my opinions were, but I also told her, I'm here to listen, and you've got some really interesting things to say. And that's what I want to highlight. So it's not my job to agree with you on everything. It's my job to, it's not my job to believe what you believe, but it's my job to present what you believe in a fair and accurate way. And I think because I was so transparent and just kind of sincere about wanting to learn, she was really wonderful. She was very gracious to me. We had really wonderful talks, and she loves her dogs with this profound, almost spiritual, I've never seen a relationship between working dogs and handlers that is as deep in kind of that mutual understanding as the relationship that Diane Jessup has with her dogs. And so wherever she and I might disagree on things, I thought that was absolutely beautiful, and I completely respected it. So
many people with who have a lot of conviction. It's almost like they come from a place of defense, because no one's willing to take the time to understand them.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was wondering, at what point did you come to that realization that, maybe this person it's like that little bout of empathy and understanding is kind of like what the water that puts the fire out.
Yeah.
I wonder when you came to that realization with her that maybe that's when the hackles went down, and here was a person in you just trying to understand where this woman's coming from.
Yeah, I mean, that's very astute. Yeah, and that happened fairly fast. I mean, 'cause as you saw in the book, I mean, she's very funny and she's very smart. And there's absolutely not a minute that goes by in her presence where something hilarious, off the wall, strange, cool, hard. I mean, everything is, and I think that's kind of why she's drawn to her particular type of dog, is she lives at this pretty intense volume. And like she says in the book, we need robust things in our lives. Like, we're in the age of the insipid, spineless person. But yeah, she had such great stories, and it really happened very fast. It was just one person being open to another person, the other person letting them in. And that's really a gift for any storyteller, to have somebody let you into their world that way and to let their guard down so much is something that I take very seriously.
And so again, once you find that people are reach that point of I'm sorry, I was talking away from my mic. Reach that point of sort of vulnerability. How do you then handle what then has to be the reality of what you do, and then write the story, and using that information and to tell to tell the story you want to tell, even though it may not shine the greatest, most flattering light on the person?
Yeah, that's something that I struggle with tremendously, because you talk to most people long enough, and I think I'm kind of cursed in a way that no matter who I'm talking to, I can always find something in them that, if I'm willing to put in the time, if I spend, all day with somebody and I'm really asking open, sincere questions, then I always come away with, a sense of empathy and a sense of that common humanity, even if we have completely different views. So I never want anyone to feel that they let their guard down and they were somehow betrayed, or that I was not careful, that I kind of use that against them, because I think about how much I would hate it if someone did that to me, how hurt and upset I would be. And so up front, I always make very clear, and that's what I did with Diane, that's what I did with everyone, saying, I'm here to listen. And as I said before, I'm not here to believe what you believe, but I do want to represent what you believe in a fair and accurate way. And that doesn't mean I'm going to agree. And that doesn't mean you're going to like everything that I say. Like, we will have points of disagreement. So, that I kind of put that on the table right up front, because I don't think there could be anything worse than really letting your guard down and letting someone into your life. I mean, people talk to journalists almost the way they talk to therapists, because a lot of times, there are a lot of people who don't have therapists and they don't have that experience of, immersive conversation about their life story and their struggles and their conflicts and all these things. So it's a very, they can end up being very fragile in that space. And I can't imagine if I did that with someone and then they just, shredded me in some mean-spirited way. And I think, and I hope came across even with the people in the book who I didn't agree with, I really tried to basically to be empathetic first, to say, I really do understand why this person feels this way. I don't agree, but I understand why they feel that way. And I really can't stand mean-spiritedness in writing. I don't like that. I don't like it when other writers do that. I don't want to do it myself. I don't like gotcha journalism. I'm not out to get anyone. If I truly dislike somebody, I just won't write about them,
Yeah, it's a cheap shot that ultimately the writer sort of has this power and has this sledgehammer at their disposal, and
yes.
it's in poor taste to take someone and just hit them over the head with it, make fun of them. I think Elizabeth Gilbert, she was on the Long Form podcast a couple of weeks ago. She used to do that in some of her early columns, to which she like spoke about it with like, you know, some regret. Like that wasn't cool. You know, I would go meet these people who were like super passionate about XYZ, and then she would go back to her, you know, her computer and then just rake them over the coals. And like she admitted that was just kind of a low blow, but that's essentially the power that is at a writer's disposal, and it's up to you ethically to leave it in the holster or just bury that hammer and never use it.
Yeah, and in the course of the book, I found, you know, I did so much research. I mean, just so much more than what is actually in there. And I found many unflattering things about many people that I wrote about. And especially unflattering things about the people whose views I really did not agree with. And so there was an ethical consideration for me. Do I use this to, you know, quote, win an argument, basically? Am I going to use something like this that could potentially really, you know, I don't want to say ruin somebody's life. I would never do that. But I mean, that is not germane to this particular topic. Do I use it because I have it and because it's out there in the public domain? Or am I, you know, going to take a higher road than that? And I just didn't want to be a person that goes and digs up unflattering stuff and just puts it out there for everyone. I hate the spirit of that. Nobody deserves that. And I'm sure there are lots of people that wish I had, but I that's just not the writer I want to be. The only time I would ever publish something unflattering, like truly unflattering about someone, is if I believe that was important for the public to know because that person was doing real harm to someone. You know, like if someone was, I don't know, harming, you know, a pedophile or harming children, or, you know, a politician who's, you know, crooked and taking bribes and like hurting people's lives. Like that would be something that I would feel okay. But just digging through people's personal lives and sharing unflattering information, I'm never going to do that. No.
And to give people an idea of the extent of the research you did, in the galley I have, there's over 30 pages of endnotes, and what can only be termed as 8-point font or something. So we're dealing with just exhaustive research in the most flattering sense to that you use to tell the story. I mean, what?
Thank you.
Yeah, what was? I mean, it looks like there was a lot. There was a lot for you to comb through. Like, how did you sort it out? How did you organize it all to thread and sort of braid this whole story together?
Yeah. And I think in the manuscript pages, it was almost 100 pages of endnotes. So, and I had to like cut big chunks, you know, because it was like literally every word was like an endnote and endnote and endnote, and you can't like have half your book be endnotes. So, it was really enormous. I mean, my book was almost 2 years late. Because I just couldn't stop researching, and I was like soothing my anxiety about writing by doing more research and more research and more research. And it became this kind of like OCD obsession. And I actually had to talk to a few colleagues about this, because it was really keeping me from moving forward in the same way that, you know, the obsessive can't stop washing his hands, and he, you know, is always late to work and sometimes misses whole days because he just can't stop washing his hands. And that's kind of the way it was. I would check and I would recheck and I would go find 5 more documents, and I would go to another library and I would interview another person and I would find another, you know, way to keep going and going. And eventually my editor was like, you know, you got to stop doing this. Like, you have mountains of information. You already have more than you can use. And it was fear of like my contract getting canceled, or fear of not being able to do a good job, or like just kind of like the the shame of not turning it in on time pushed me to go ahead and do it. But the organization was really something I struggle with a lot. God bless Evernote. Everything changed for me when I finally started using Evernote. And that was like probably 2 years into the process. So then I had to go back and refile everything and scan everything. And that was absolutely the best invention of all time ever, to be able to have everything keyword searchable, to be able to tag things, OCR, all that stuff really made my life so much better. And things, once I got everything in that kind of format, then everything started moving a lot more quickly.
So how did getting kind of granular on Evernote? How did you use it to your advantage?
Yeah, so I had a notebook for every major theme I wanted to talk about. I tagged the shit out of every single article with everything I could think of. And also because a lot of it was historical, I would make, if they were, whether it was an academic journal article or a newspaper clip or a photo or anything like that, I would put the year at the beginning of the title of the note. So then when I alphabetized it, everything immediately fell into chronological order. So if I could, like, for instance, I had a chapter on, I could have a chapter on guard dogs, like the whole culture of guard dogs from like the late 60s on. And so then I could look, okay, I can basically go from, 1700 to the present and look, what was going on in 1974? What do I have from 1974? And boom, I can immediately call that up and it's all in order. So I would do like basically the year and then the month and the day, and then everything would fall into immediate order. Thank you, Evernote. You are the best. If I could do product placement for Evernote for the rest of my life, I would do it. It's amazing. Yeah.
So what was your routine like when you were writing this book?
When I wasn't crying? When I wasn't curled up in a ball? Yeah. When I wasn't saying, I can't do this, it's too much information, I'll never finish.
Well, even before you answer the routine question, how did you pull yourself out of the fetal crying fits? The fetal crying fits. Yeah, it really was. It was like the fear of failing and having nothing was greater than the fear of doing it. And so I guess it was some kind of sense of self-preservation. But interestingly enough, I had to get away from all that research in order to be able to write the first draft. So I had to, when I was sitting in my office with all my filing cabinets, and I accumulated so much shit. Like I had like scrapbooks full of like actual scrapbooks that people had put together on like a breed ban in Florida. Someone actually sold that on eBay, and I was like, shit, a whole scrapbook full of articles about pit bull bans in Florida on eBay? Yes, thanks. I had stacks of photos that I had bought from various like estate sales. I had all this stuff, and like I think it was between 100 and 200 books on the shelves just about this. Wow. And then all my interview notes and my notebooks and all this stuff. And it got to the point where sitting in that office felt so oppressive to me. I couldn't think. So I had to completely get out of there. I went to Duke Law Library and I sat in a carrel that had like no view. Mm-hmm. And I just banged out what I already knew off the top of my head, like what was coming to me as most salient. Because if I was constantly checking and rechecking and referencing and quoting and whatever, then I couldn't move forward. So to do the first draft, I had to just basically write things from memory. And once I had that, I went back and I made sure the quotes were accurate, and I checked the dates and I checked the times, and I did all the kind of granular fact checking work. And then I refined the ideas and all that stuff. But I couldn't really make progress until I just got all that stuff out of the way. How would you describe the nature of your talent?
I don't don't really think about talent. I mean, I honestly, I think I probably have more like pathological self-doubt than any writer I've ever known.
We could probably go head to head on that.
I think I might got you beat. I really don't like the word talent does not even enter my anything because if I think about anything in terms of like talent or trying to have it or if I have it or what, I'll just drive myself insane. So all I know is that if I put in the work, like there are all kinds of people who can easily outright me, but there are very few who can outwork me. And I know that like the work part is the piece that I have control over. Mm-hmm. So if I'm willing to take it through 5 drafts and someone else is only willing to take it through 2, then, you know, at the end of 5 drafts, it's going to be better than it would have been otherwise. So that's all it's work. I just consider it's just like, you know, putting in studs in a house or, you know, carpentry or anything like that. And that's the only way I can think about it to be able to do it.
Glenn Stout, who is on this podcast, and he's just a writer, editor, and one of his big things was the only thing you can control is your effort.
Exactly.
You know? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So like, even when people like use like when the word talent somehow floats around a conversation, it just like, it gives me hives or something. Because, you know, it's like a unicorn. I mean, I don't know, you know, I don't know. I think if there's anything I think if there's anything I'm good at is just like how far I'll go to, like how much effort I will put in, how many drafts I'm willing to take it through, how much research I'm willing to do, and just that ability to go the extra mile. I think that's the only talent I have.
Now, Eva Holland, who I interviewed a while ago,
she's awesome.
Oh, she's the best, and she's really great. But she said something that kind of cuts against what you just said, in that to do this kind of work, she's like, I don't know how you can't believe you're any good or you can't believe in your own talent. So I have to think on some level, you believe it's not just the work that you put in that you believe in. You have to know. You went through a graduate program. You've come. You know, you had a touch. Yeah, you had that story you wrote when you were 15 about your father passing away. Like on some level, you must believe in your ability and that you do have talent that makes you rise above a lot of other people.
Well, here, I'll tell you what. I think what I believe in is I know if I work hard enough, I guess I think most about possibility, because every single piece I do is the current piece I'm doing is always an attempt to redeem the last piece that didn't turn out as well as I hoped. You know, so it's always like kind of next time I'm going to nail it. Next time I'm going to nail it. And it's a kind of, I guess it's like almost like a gambler's addiction in a way. It's like, I think, I turn ideas over in my head really thoroughly. I really enjoy what I do. I'm very passionate about it. I don't know if I'm any good at it, but I do believe that if I keep at it, I can say something interesting. I do believe that it's like the Australian novelist Tim Winton, who's a surfer as well, often writes about or talks about the experience of writing as, you know, you're like a surfer out there on your board waiting for a wave, and you don't know when it's going to come, and you don't know if it's going to be good, if it's going to be big, or if it's going to be small, or whatever, or if it's going to be a storm, or who knows what's going to happen. But if you sit there long enough, the law of the ocean is a wave will come. And so I think about it kind of that way a lot myself, in that if I just keep at it, something will happen. I'm not going to attach myself to like how good it is or if other people think it's good or whatever, because I just don't have any control over that. I'm going to do the best job I can do. And I'm going to keep putting myself out there, and I'm going to keep trying to redeem the last piece I didn't nail.
And in your eyes, have you nailed any piece?
No. No, I'm still redeeming every, you know, and the same thing is like the conspiracy piece. I'm like, because in your head, I can always see, it's like thinking about a Rubik's Cube and all the possibilities. You can see all these possibilities and they all look so great in your head. And then when you commit it to paper, it's like, I think Calvin Trillin talks about this. He said, it's always like 20% less good than you thought it would be, or like that idea that sounded so good in your head just does not work at all on the page. And so there's like the disappointment, but then you have to keep going. So yeah, it's always that process.
So what other artistic media do you consume that you draw inspiration from?
Music.
I was gonna say it's got to be music. When you pull a Henry Rollins quote out of your bank, like, all right, here's a punk rocker. A metal,
I mean, I'm not like a huge Black Flag fan or anything, but I love that quote, and I think he's like a really interesting cultural figure. I actually think, he's kind of like infuriating but super passionate, and sometimes he says things that are like really brilliant, and sometimes he's kind of a buffoon, and he's like a really interesting guy. I would love to have like a beer with Henry Rollins if he still drinks. I don't know if he does. But yeah, music. I talk to so many writers, so many friends of mine, who, like I'm very into, classic rock and the history of rock and roll and blues and jazz and all these things. And some of my friends are totally bewildered by this. And I always want to say to them, like, you're a writer. What you do is music. You are putting music on the page. Your work will only pan out if what you say is musical and pleasing to kind of the internal ear of the reader. So how can you not be into music? I think writers should spend all their free time listening to music. Why certain songs work, why certain lyrics work, how the metrics of a line, how the meter works. All those things I think are really, really important to writing, even though I can't listen to music when I write, which is interesting. That
was just going to be my next question. Like, why can't you listen to music while you write?
I'm just too distractible. I actually have to put earplugs in and have noise canceling headphones on top of the earplugs.
I do that sometimes too.
Because I just can't, I'm so distractible, and I'll look for any reason to like escape the hell of facing the blank page. So I have to have total silence. Yeah.
Something else I do, like sometimes I'll do that. Other times I'll put one particular instrumental song on repeat, and I just do the one song over and over and over again, and it kind of just after a while just puts me into a meditative trance where it's just kind of like it's something that kind of just resonates on sort of an ethereal level, and then I just I don't even know it's there anymore.
Right.
Other times I just throw Metallica on and just go fucking ballistic.
Oh, good for you. I'm so glad that works for you. I would love if I could throw Metallica on and it would actually work. Like I know, I think it was Darcy Frey who wrote, he wrote The Last Shot that kind of was the basis for Hoop Dreams and some other stuff. He was one of my teachers in my MFA program. I think at one point he talked about I think it was him. He said trying to, get the feeling of the rhythm of a piece by listening constantly to the Rolling Stones. And I was like, yeah, I so wish I could do that. I love the Rolling Stones. I would love to put Sticky Fingers on and like get into the rhythm of like, and have that kind of transport me away. But unfortunately it just doesn't happen. There was a while when I was like, really, really blocked and I couldn't write anything. I was like, maybe binaural beats. Binaural beats will be the answer. And I was listening, and I don't know if you've ever listened to binaural beats. These like entrainment things like that have certain frequencies and they're supposed to help you focus or something. But it's like weird sounds. Like it was made by aliens or something. And so sometimes I would like fall asleep and I would have these crazy dreams. And I was like, no more binaural beats. I can't do that anymore. It's so weird. No, it didn't work.
So that's hilarious. Oh man. So what are your what is your go-to music to listen to?
Hard rock, classic rock. I mean, Stones, classic soul, Marvin Gaye, Sam Cooke, I mean, just anything. I love Ray LaMontagne, yet I also love, Guns N' Roses, yet I also love, pretty much anything. Honestly, pretty much anything. But probably bluesy classic rock / hard rock stuff is probably like the sweet spot, or classic soul.
So Bronwen Dickey enters a room. What would your theme music be?
Like, what would I want it to be?
Yeah.
Or
what song would it be?
Oh God. Like what it would actually be, what I would want to be. Oh God, I would love to like have "You Could Be Mine" by GNR, like Terminator 2 playing everywhere I go, like feeling like the biggest badass in the world. But it would probably be something like, I don't know, Beaker from the Muppets or something. It would probably be like crickets and, weird circus music or something. I don't know. Sweet Child of Mine would be a great theme song.
Nice. All right.
That's my ringtone.
Yeah, I think if I what I would say when I go into a room, it would be like the Final Countdown.
Oh, okay. That's bold. All right. All right.
Yeah, I don't know why. I think I just saw that Geico commercial recently, so that song's coming to the forefront.
Europe. Have you seen the documentary Anvil?
No.
Oh, you gotta watch that. Oh, you gotta watch it. It's so good. It's so good about this like washed up heavy metal band that like never happened, and they're like trying to make it happen, and they're so sweet and earnest, and it's great. You gotta see it. Anvil. It's amazing.
So that kind of brings up an interesting question of like when do you give up as an artist? Now, I think I preface that like it clearly like you don't write a book of this magnitude and get it published by Knopf without having the requisite ability to do so. But I wonder like what goes through your mind, like if you had yourself like if there was, I don't know, a deadline or something in your head that would say, like, maybe it's just not going to happen. Like, did you ever roll that around in your head? Like, what you would, sort of like an escape valve, or were you just full bore, I'm just doing this until I die? No, not for the book. Just, like, you in general. Like what validation did you need to keep going?
I think a little validation can take you a really, really long. I'm a validation camel. So really, I mean, I just 500 no's, and then you get one yes, and that can take you through the next 500 no's. Yeah. So I think just little, getting little assignments here and there, and just the faith. Really just keeping the faith that you keep going. It's the law of averages. After a while, you keep learning about your craft. You keep working on improving your skills. You keep putting yourself out there and learning about the field. And eventually, again, the wave has to come in, whether it's an idea or a yes or whatever. I think if nothing had ever worked out and I was truly making myself miserable, if I got to the point where I just didn't enjoy it anymore, where I couldn't get motivated, I couldn't get excited, I couldn't talk to people at, you go to a cookout and someone says, hey, what do you think about X? And you don't immediately like vomit out 50 ideas because you're so excited, then I couldn't do it anymore. Then for sure.
Yeah, because if someone asks you what you do at a dinner party or cocktail party, and you say like, "Oh, I'm a writer," and
I try not to go to cocktail parties.
Yeah, yeah, I've never been invited to one, but
yeah, who goes to those things?
Exactly. But like, if someone asks you what you do and you say that, and like you kind of swell with a little bit of pride, because it is something that takes a certain measure of courage that a lot of other people don't have. And I think if you can say it with that certain courage, you know that you are meant to do it, and you really can't stop. It's just kind of in your bones.
Yeah. Well, I'm still not there yet. I still say I usually, and I talked to someone about this recently too. I usually say it feels so weird to say I'm a writer for that precise reason. So again, I always kind of, for myself, just to not freak myself out or to not get too self-conscious or precious about it, I always focus on like the craft, like the actual work that I do. Like I say, I'm a journalist, obviously, or I'm a reporter or whatever. And that takes the pressure off, I think, for me, for them, for everything. I just, once it gets too lofty, once that balloon, that helium balloon kind of like starts getting really big and like floating away with like, we're capital W writer and literature and talent and, all these things, it's too easy for me to tie myself up in knots anyway. So I just focus on like one foot in front of the other, hammering that nail one day.
Binaural music.
Yeah, binaural beats. Hey, woo! Binaural beats. That's just a trip and a half.
All right, so I'll transition to a few sort of rapid fire questions that don't necessarily need rapid fire responses, because I want to be respectful of your time.
Okay.
Are you up against a clock here, or are you still good to go?
No, I'm good to go.
Cool. All right, so if you were moving to like a tiny house or a remote island paradise, and in a move, you could only ship or carry 5 to 10 books with you, what would you choose to keep?
Number one would be Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov, for sure. Because every time I read that novel, I get a completely different something out of it. It's so deep and so complex and so universal at the same time. It's just everything. It's my favorite novel ever. I would probably take the Riverside Shakespeare, because I don't think you can get, when you look at how much Shakespeare added to the language, how he used language, the music of his language, what he reveals in his characters about human motivations and relationships, I think will never be paralleled as long as we all live. I would take Joan Didion's Slouching Towards Bethlehem. I would take collected essays, Annie Dillard. I would take Michael Hare's Dispatches. That's one of those books that I read again and again and again and again, and I still can't figure out why it works. But the language is just hypnotic and amazing. I would take Tim Winton's Breath. It's a novel about surfing that, again, it's one of those ones where the language is so incredible and it never feels cumbersome. It just feels completely organic. And he uses words in ways I didn't know they could be used. And yet you're not constantly drawn to like, oh, look at me, I'm showing off kind of thing. So I don't know how he does it, but he does it. It's great. I would take James Baldwin, The Fire Next Time. I would take, that's probably 10.
I've got a count of 7, so if you want 3 more, you can have them.
Oh God. Well, now I'm gonna I would take Thomas Lynch, The Undertaking. That's a fantastic essay collection. Thomas Lynch is a poet, but he's also, his family business. His family ran a funeral home, so he's an undertaker and funeral director. And so he wrote these incredibly beautiful essays on the process of death that I think are just magnificent, and I go back to over and over again. I think it's probably it. I mean, excellent. Unless I could take more, I'll probably take more Dostoevsky, probably take some Faulkner, Hemingway, those guys, the guys.
So what book or books, and you referred to one already, do you reread the most? And
I'd say probably Dispatches.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is really odd because I remember reading that book for class in college and being like, what is going on with this book? Like, I don't even know. Like, is this some kind of like beat something, or is it, which I usually don't go for that aesthetic. But holy hell, Michael Hare. I don't know how he does what he does, but I could read, there's a chapter called Illumination Rounds that is one of the most beautifully written passages I've ever encountered in my life. He just makes Vietnam, the process of being in Vietnam in the 60s, completely, I mean, it's like the psychedelia of the 60s is kind of in there, the horror of war, the fear, all these things are in there, and it's just astonishing. So I probably, that's the one I could never write like that. It's very different from the way I write, but I aspire to such things.
So, and what does the first 60 to 90 minutes of your day look like?
Oh, goodness.
When do you typically wake up?
Usually about 7.
Mm-hmm.
Here it is. I wake up at 7 and I think today is going to be the day when I go for that 5-mile run, and it's really going to happen today. And then it doesn't happen. Sometimes it'll happen like way later in the day, but I always think today is going to be the day I feel like exercising right now. And it is never the day. So there's the shame that goes with that, or the guilt, or the, am I going to do it? Am I not going to do it?
So you start your day with a good helping of shame. Good.
Yes. No, and then I get up. Actually, the first thing I do usually, after breakfast or whatever, is I usually read a lot of the magazine articles that are on long form or whatever. I usually kind of do a lot of my magazine reading, seeing what people, I check social media and see what articles people are posting. I usually use social media most as kind of like a broadcast mechanism. So I want to know what people are reading or are interested in. Twitter, if anything has happened newsworthy that I need to know about, like, for instance, when Ferguson was happening, it was so great to be able to check exactly what was going on by the minute. So I'll just kind of get a sense of what's happening in the world, and then I'll kind of fill in on the long form stuff, who I know that might have an article out, that kind of thing. And then after that, I have to kind of like prime the pump to write by reading something really where the language is really kind of inspiring to me. So mostly that's fiction. But sometimes it'll be something like, Michael Hare, or it'll be Tim Winton, or it'll be Annie Dillard, or something, one of those people. I'll just read a couple of paragraphs or a couple of pages to kind of get excited about language and kind of psych myself up that way. And then I just bang it out. But a lot of times, I'll put it off and grab my head and rearrange my sock drawer and, that kind of thing. Or, I have an errand. I really can't work until I have this errand done, and that's really kind of how that goes. But when I was really working intensely on the book, it was basically, I got up, I got to the library and I was in the Carrel by 9 and, work from 9 to 12, take a lunch break outside, 1 to 5 back in the Carrel and just banging it out.
So, do you journal at all?
Not in terms of like narrating my day. Mm-hmm. I do. And this is another thing that it's like when you get blocked, you'll try anything. And I remember all these like woo people, like things that I would never thought I would do, talk about like, you should just free write like 3 pages every day just to like get the cobwebs out of your head. And I was like, that sounds like some kind of new agey bullshit. And that's not me. But holy Lord, when I started doing it, it was amazing. Like, it was amazing. Seriously. Like, to just be like, I'm worried about X, or, I need to go to the store, or like whatever pops into your head, and just get 3 pages of it out so that it's not like clogging up your pipes. Mm-hmm. Really helps. Who knew? Thank you, New Age people. That is a great idea. I do that all the time.
That's the Julia Cameron approach.
It is.
Yeah, the
and
artist's
I swear
way.
to God, it actually works. And I know. I hoped you weren't going to say the title of the book that I didn't want to say.
I'm sorry.
But I swear it works. It works. It works. I don't know if you've ever done it.
Oh, I have. I journal 3 pages every morning.
Oh, you do it too?
Yeah.
Wait, or do you like narrate what happens in your life?
Oh, it's everything. It's an airing of insecurity.
Yeah.
Just dealing with demons, errands. Yeah. I mean, it's everything. It's a dialogue I've actually kept a journal since I was 16 years old.
That's amazing.
And well, thank you. And but I adopted the Artist's Way approach 2 years ago. So before I was before the Artist's Way sort of routine, I averaged about a journal entry every 3 days, just kind of checking in with myself, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And then I started doing the Artist's Way thing, just hoping it would kick me.
Can we just call it something else?
I know. Yeah, just call it the morning pages. That seems a lot better.
Exactly. And didn't you find like your writing got clearer? Did you find that?
I found that I was more productive. That's for sure. I haven't. It's funny. I've been in a little bit of a journaling slump of late, and I've noticed like I've just kind of like fallen off the rails and just been kind of lazy with stuff. I'm like, oh well, shit. I haven't been like keeping up with waking up and then just hitting the journal for a few pages, and like I'm like, all right, well, there's probably why you're kind of in this slump. So. Yeah, it's weird.
It's wild.
Like I don't deal with writer's block per se. That's just something that doesn't happen. Because in nonfiction, it's like, all right, well, if I don't have any material, I'll just go out and talk to somebody.
Exactly, right? I think Philip Gurevich said this great thing in a talk I went to once where he says, the great thing about nonfiction is if you don't know what happens next, you just call up one of your characters and ask.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. But
Exactly. Yeah. So I can't support it enough as a practice just to warm up and like as you said, like kind of like prime the pump.
It's amazing. Yeah. So I mean, I didn't want to like talk about AW, but I do the thing in the notebook. That's actually the first thing I do. Yeah. Yeah. I do that thing that helps a lot.
Yeah. That thing that woman who wrote that book tells you to do.
Which freaking works. Who knew? Who knew? Everyone should do this, and I'm not being paid to say that. I do not have any kind of
sponsored by Evernote and Julia Cameron.
Oh God. Yeah, but no, it works. It definitely does. So yeah, that actually that helped me a lot actually when I was working on the book too.
So a couple more things. When you hear the word successful, what or who comes to mind, and what does that mean?
The most successful writers I know, honestly, are the people who are the most generous and caring and nurturing of other writers. And so the two that come to mind are, they've had commercial success, obviously, but that's really not why I consider this. So like Pat Conroy was a good friend, and he was, no matter how, many books he had sold or whatever, he was so generous, open, interested in other people, just loyal, compassionate, funny, warm. He would go out of his way to help others. He would sign books for hours upon hours upon hours. He was just so giving. And so when I think about what it is to be a successful writer, it really doesn't have to do with like sales or name recognition or any of that stuff, because I'd actually prefer never, ever, ever to be under the kind of microscope that someone like Pat Conroy was under. But his generosity was just everything. And the other one would be Ron Rash, who wrote Serena and a bunch of other really good novels. He is so warm and kind, and helpful to other writers, so supportive of young writers, always helpful with a blurb or a contact or anything like that. So, and the writers that don't indulge in like backbiting about other writers, I think that's like fantastically poor form. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's ugly. And you see a lot of it in the writing world because there's so much insecurity.
Yeah.
But I just think that's like the ugliest thing in the world. And I would never, want to help someone who was talking smack, talking shit about other people. I would never, So I always tell when I'm taught, or when people ask me about like, well, how do you be a writer or whatever, I say there are like 3 rules. The first one is show up. The second one is don't be an asshole. And the third is don't die. And honestly, everything you need to know falls under those 3 things. Show up, do your work, turn things in on time. Sometimes I will, my anxiety keeps me from doing that, but don't ask for raises you don't deserve. Don't, be hard to work with, be respectful, be interested, be open, all those things. Like show up, take opportunities, put yourself in the place of opportunity, in the path of opportunities, and don't be an asshole. Don't talk shit about other people. Don't, flake. Don't do all those things. And then don't die. Like, don't get swept up in all the self-destructive bullshit that writers easily get swept up in.
Well, that's poignant and beautiful and terse advice.
It works, I swear. It's just like morning pages.
Yes.
I swear.
Those things that woman tells us to do in that book.
Exactly. It works. It's simple and it works. Yeah.
All right. Lastly, where can people find you online? So when the book promotion's going full bore, and then even when that slows down, where can people find you to stay abreast of your work?
I have a poorly maintained website, but that's probably the best place, or on Twitter. So BronwenDickey.com is my website, and I'm on Twitter at Bronwen Dickey.
Well, fantastic. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure for me to spend some time and getting to know you and talking to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you did a wonderful job with the book. I wish you the best of success going forward.
Thank you so much, Brendan. I really appreciate this. It's great talk.
Fantastic. Well, we'll be in touch, and take good care.
All right. Take care. Bye.
That's it for another episode of #CNF. Thank you very much for listening. If you made it this far, and this is a bit of a test, if you've made it this far, I'm willing, out of pocket, of course, if you're interested, to provide 5 copies, well, 1 copy per person, of my book, 6 Weeks in Saratoga, the paperback with fewer typos, signed and personalized and mailed to you. So if you've made it this far, all you have to do is subscribe to my monthly email newsletter. And first 5 people I see come through the system will get a signed and personalized copy of the book. So that's it. This is a test. We'll see who made it and who didn't. So thank you for listening. And if you made it this far, an even special thank you. Thank you.